When the sun rose on June 6, 1944, tension hung thick in the air, and all eyes were fixed on the Atlantic coast of Normandy. For Oberleutnant Wilhelm Krauss, stationed at the fortified defenses, that morning felt like any other. Just days earlier, he had dismissed the American troops in his diary, labeling them weak and spoiled by a materialistic society, unprepared for the brutality of real combat. His thoughts echoed a belief prevalent among the Wehrmacht, who prided themselves on their experience from years of fierce fighting on the Eastern Front. As he peered through the scope of his rifle, a false sense of security wrapped around him like a warm blanket, shielding him from the storm that was about to unfold. Krauss felt a mix of confidence and disdain. The propaganda machinery of the Nazis had depicted the Americans as inexperienced boys, incapable of enduring the harsh realities of battle. This conviction was shared by many high-ranking officials who had grown arrogant, convinced that the Atlantic Wall, with its formidable defenses, would effortlessly repel any invasion. In that moment, Krauss felt relief, believing that Omaha Beach would be another testament to German superiority. Yet, beneath the bravado, a small seed of doubt began to take root, masked by the adrenaline of final preparations. As the morning fog lifted, the distant sound of aircraft loomed ominously. The air crackled with anticipation, hinting that today would not unfold as he had imagined. The men under his command were caught in a similar paradox, their loyalty warring with a creeping unease as they prepared for an attack they thought would be easily thwarted. Months before this day, Krauss had been convinced that the Allies would fail. Since early 1944, whispers of an impending invasion had reached him, but his faith in the superiority of the German military dulled any sense of fear. He watched as younger soldiers filled the ranks, their eager faces contrasting with the hardened resolve he had come to expect. It was easier to mock the Americans, to believe that their comforts left them ill-equipped for sacrifice. In training, he often recounted tales of old battles, relishing the discipline and hardship that defined the German soldier. As dawn broke, the stillness shattered with the thunderous roar of artillery, and the beaches erupted into chaos. Krauss's heart raced as he witnessed the first waves of American troops land. Their boats surged toward the shore, and he saw determination etched on their faces, a stark contrast to the fragile image he had conjured. The moment he had underestimated them came crashing back like waves against the shore. Gunfire erupted, cries of anguish filled the air, and the beach transformed into a hellscape. Krauss gripped his rifle, adrenaline surging through his veins, shouting commands to his men, but the chaos threatened to overwhelm him. Instead of retreating, the Americans pressed on, moving steadily through the hail of bullets, revealing their relentless resolve. In the heat of battle, surrounded by falling bodies, Krauss recognized the profound implications of his arrogance. The belief that the Americans would crumble under pressure proved disastrous. Each moment stretched into eternity as he struggled to keep his men focused amid overwhelming odds. His initial confidence faltered, replaced by a gnawing fear of failure. As hours dragged on, it became clear to Krauss that the battlefield was more than a physical confrontation. It was a clash of ideologies, a testament to the resolve of men fighting not for glory, but for freedom. The sun blazed overhead, illuminating the stark reality of war. There were no winners today, only losses and sacrifices. By day's end, the German forces would face staggering casualties, a devastating total of 6 Juerzerud men lost in a single day. Months before the chaos of June 6, 1944, Oberleutnant Wilhelm Krauss sat in the dim light of his bunker, surrounded by whispers of an impending invasion. The year was 1944. And the air was thick with speculation about the Allies launching a massive operation against Normandy. Krauss, however, dismissed these rumors as exaggerated fears of a fading enemy. Since early spring, he had observed a troubling confidence among his comrades. They believed in the superiority of the Wehrmacht, bolstered by past victories on the Eastern Front. Krauss himself felt certain that American soldiers were naive and untested, their lives of comfort rendering them ill-equipped for the harsh realities of war. He often recalled stories from older comrades, hardened by battle, contrasting them with the eager but inexperienced faces of the new recruits he was training. In these training sessions, Krauss emphasized the discipline and resolve that defined a German soldier. He recounted tales of perseverance leading to victory against overwhelming odds, unaware that those lessons would soon be put to the ultimate test. The camaraderie among the soldiers created a facade of confidence, masking an unsettling undercurrent of doubt and uncertainty. Amid the preparations, Krauss exchanged letters with his fiancée Anneliese back in Germany. Her words were filled with longing and fears for his safety. He reassured her with promises of steadfastness, echoing the propaganda that insisted Germany would prevail. He was convinced that the Atlantic Wall, fortified with concrete and steel, would withstand any assault, leaving him unprepared for the reality that lay ahead. As the date of the invasion approached, Krauss remained unaware of the tactical shifts occurring among the Allies. Conversations among his fellow officers reinforced their belief that any American attack would be easily repelled, dismissing the threat as a diversion. Their arrogance was palpable, a dangerous mindset that would soon be shattered. On the morning of D-Day, as Krauss prepared his men for what he thought would be a routine defense, a sense of unease began to creep in. The morning fog hung low over the beach, obscuring the horizon and shrouding the truth from him. He shook off the feeling, bolstered by years of military training and an unwavering faith in the German war machine. As the morning wore on, the tension in the air intensified. Distant sounds of artillery grew louder, vibrating through the ground and sending shivers down Krauss's spine. Then, without warning, the calm shattered. The thunder of explosions echoed across the shore, and Krauss's heart raced as he rushed to his post, realizing the gravity of the situation. They were not facing a routine attack. They were confronting a force that would test the very limits of their resolve. Gripping his rifle, he stared out at the chaos unfolding on the beach. The shadows of doubt that had lingered began to take shape, and the reality of the American soldiers emerged, dispelling the myths he had held dear. As the first waves of American troops surged ashore, Krauss prepared himself for a battle that would challenge everything he thought he knew about war, courage, and the determination of men fighting for freedom. As the sun broke through the morning fog on June 6, 1944, the tranquility of Omaha Beach was violently shattered. The thunderous roar of artillery and the sharp crack of gunfire filled the air, creating a chaotic symphony that resonated in Oberleutnant Wilhelm Krauss's chest. He stood at his post, heart racing, gripped by disbelief. This was the moment he had prepared for, yet nothing could ready him for the brutal reality unfolding before his eyes. Through the haze of smoke, Krauss watched as American landing crafts approached the shore like a swarm of hornets. His confidence began to waver as he noted the determination on the faces of the men disembarking. They were not the weaklings he had envisioned. They were resolute and driven by purpose. The sight sent a shiver down his spine, a stark reminder that his previous assessments had been dangerously naive. As the American troops stormed the beach, Krauss shouted orders to his men, urging them to hold their positions. The weight of responsibility pressed down on him, each command an attempt to rally their wavering spirits. The cacophony of battle drowned out his attempts to instill confidence. His soldiers struggled to adapt to the chaos. The beach was teeming with movement, men falling, cries of the wounded piercing the air, and the relentless advance of the enemy. With each moment, Krauss's heart sank deeper. The Germans had fortified their defenses, yet the Americans pressed on, their courage unyielding. He could see them trudging through the surf, some falling under fire, while others crawled forward, driven by grim determination. He had underestimated their resolve, and that error was now becoming painfully evident. Gripping his rifle tightly, Kraus felt his knuckles turn white. The chaos around him blurred into a haze of sound and movement, making him feel as if he were watching a nightmare rather than participating in it. The battlefield was a cacophony of gunfire, shouts, and the sickening thud of bodies hitting the ground. Each fallen soldier shattered a piece of his heart, igniting a gnawing fear of failure. In the midst of the turmoil, he caught sight of a young American soldier crawling through the sand. Their eyes briefly locked, igniting a shared understanding of the struggle they faced. Kraus recognized that both men were fighting for their beliefs, regardless of the uniform they wore. It was a stark reminder that this conflict was not about glory, but about survival. As the battle raged on, the tide began to shift. Kraus could no longer deny that they were confronting an enemy willing to sacrifice everything for their cause. Panic surged among his men, and he fought to maintain control, shouting encouragement that felt increasingly hollow. Suddenly, a loud explosion shook the ground, knocking Kraus off balance. He regained his footing to find his men faltering, their fierce loyalty wavering against overwhelming odds. The reality crystallized in his mind. This was no longer a battle they could easily win. In that moment, a realization struck Kraus. The belief that the Americans would crumble under pressure was not only incorrect but disastrous. He had defined his identity around the valor of the German soldier, but now he faced a new kind of valor he had failed to acknowledge. The Americans were not retreating. They were advancing, driven by an unyielding spirit. As the sun climbed higher, the nature of the conflict became clear. This was not merely a physical confrontation. It was a clash of ideologies, showcasing the lengths men would go for freedom. The rush of adrenaline faded, replaced by a profound understanding of the weight of responsibility he bore. The haunting realization that he had underestimated the American spirit would linger in his mind long after the dust of battle settled. In those critical moments, the walls of his previous convictions began to crumble, leaving him exposed and vulnerable in the harsh light of reality. As the chaos of battle raged on, Oberleutnant Wilhelm Kraus struggled to process the unfolding events around him. Each explosion reverberated through his body, drowning out the conflicting thoughts racing in his mind. He had always believed that discipline and training would ensure victory, yet the ferocity of the American assault shattered that illusion. As he clung to his rifle, he realized that this day would forever alter the course of his life and the war itself. The sight of American soldiers advancing relentlessly toward the beach forced Kraus to confront the misconceptions he had held. They were not the naive boys he had dismissed. They were fierce warriors, driven by purpose. This realization sent a shiver down his spine, highlighting the gravity of their fight. Each wave of troops that hit the shore demonstrated a determination that was foreign to him, and with every moment he felt the weight of his earlier confidence suffocate him. Kraus began to reflect on the implications of the day's events. The outcome of this battle would not only affect the immediate conflict, but would also reshape the trajectory of the war. The loss of morale, staggering casualties, and the undeniable spirit of the American forces would resonate far beyond the shores of Normandy. As he fought to maintain control over his men, he knew he had to pivot from his previous mindset. Instead of merely issuing commands, he needed to inspire resilience in the face of overwhelming odds. Turning to his comrades, Kraus rallied them, urging them to remember their training and the sacrifices they had made. Yet as he spoke, the fatigue and fear etched on their faces became evident. Panic surged among the ranks, and he sensed the same doubt beginning to gnaw at him. The battlefield was now a chaotic clash of wills, testing their courage in ways they had never anticipated. The harsh reality of war struck him hard when he spotted a fallen comrade, a young soldier he had trained. The weight of loss settled heavily on his shoulders, serving as a reminder that this conflict was not just about victory or defeat. It was about lives irrevocably changed by the choices made in the heat of battle. Kraus's thoughts turned to Anneliese, his fiancée. In those moments of chaos, he envisioned her waiting for him, her letters filled with love and hope. What would she think of him now, standing amidst the ruins of their dreams? As the hours dragged on, Kraus began to comprehend that warfare transcended mere strength. It was a battle of ideals. The Americans were not just fighting for land, they were fighting for freedom and a future unmarred by tyranny. The sun blazed overhead, casting a stark light on the battlefield and illuminating the profound realization that had begun to take root within him. Kraus recognized that the tide of battle was shifting, but it was also a transformation of perspective. He had to reconcile the soldier he had been with the man he was becoming, understanding that true valor lay not in the uniform one wore, but in the courage to acknowledge one's own fallibility. Preparing to lead his men into the fray once more, he steeled himself for the struggle ahead. The lessons learned that day would not be easily forgotten. The battlefield had become a crucible, forging a new identity for him, one that embraced humility and the power of human resolve. With a renewed sense of purpose, Kraus stepped forward, determined to face whatever lay ahead, not just as a soldier, but as a man awakened to the complexities of honor and duty. As the battle for Omaha Beach raged on, Oberleutnant Wilhelm Kraus felt an urgent need to take decisive action. His men were wavering, caught between fear and resolve. With a deep breath, he gathered a small group of soldiers around him, their faces smeared with dirt and sweat, eyes wide with uncertainty. It was time to reconnect with them, to remind them of their shared purpose. "Listen up!" he shouted, his voice struggling to cut through the chaos. "We've trained for this. We are the defenders of our homeland, and we cannot let these invaders take what belongs to us." His words felt hollow against the relentless sounds of gunfire. But he saw flickers of determination spark in their eyes, igniting a glimmer of camaraderie. Kraus recounted their shared experiences, the laughter during drills, stories exchanged over meals, and the bond that had grown in adversity. "We are not just soldiers, we are brothers. Remember why we are here." The weight of responsibility intensified with each word spoken. He was fighting not just for victory, but also for the lives and spirits of the men around him. Determined to regain control of the beach, Kraus devised a plan for a counterattack. He quickly outlined their roles and responsibilities, urging them to push back against the Americans. "We will move together, cover each other, and push them back. We can do this." The sense of urgency fueled their adrenaline. As they advanced, the cacophony of battle grew louder. Kraus led his men, heart pounding, guiding them through the chaos with instinct and grit. The sand was hot beneath their feet, and the sounds of explosions reverberated in the air. They began to fight back, embracing the challenge ahead. But the true weight of leadership pressed heavily on Kraus. He had to make quick decisions while keeping his men focused and motivated. Each fallen soldier reminded him of what was at stake and the heavy burden of responsibility he bore. It was a day that had begun with doubt, but was now filled with determination. Suddenly, they came under heavy fire from an American position. Kraus dove for cover, adrenaline surging through him. "Take cover and return fire!" he shouted. The sound of gunfire echoed around him, and he saw the determined faces of his men come alive with purpose. They shot back, advancing toward the enemy line. Their spirits revived by the act of resistance. Kraus moved cautiously, coordinating their efforts. They fought fiercely, reclaiming ground with every step. In the heat of battle, he spotted a young soldier he had personally trained, bravely providing cover for a fallen comrade. Pride surged within him. This soldier embodied the bravery they all needed to push forward. As Kraus witnessed the bond between his men strengthen, he understood that their shared experiences, both joyous and painful, had forged an unbreakable connection. The fighting intensified, and although they faced overwhelming odds, he felt a surge of hope. They were becoming more than just a unit. They were a family fighting for one another. As the sun began to lower in the sky, casting long shadows on the beach, their counterattack gained momentum. The resolve of his men fueled his own. They began to reclaim lost ground, pushing back against the American forces. The realization that they could stand against adversity together ignited a fire within him, one that would carry him through the challenges yet to come. Kraus understood that true leadership was not merely about commanding respect. It was about inspiring hope and resilience in the face of despair. He could lead them to victory, but more importantly, he could lead them toward a purpose that transcended the battlefield. Together, they would face whatever lay ahead, united by their commitment to one another and the fight that had become so much more than just a war. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across Omaha Beach, Oberleutnant Wilhelm Kraus and his men pressed forward, their resolve tested by the brutal realities of warfare. The fierce fighting had begun to take its toll, and tensions among the soldiers started to surface. The earlier camaraderie that had driven them forward was now fraying under the weight of fear and exhaustion. Kraus felt the strain in the air as he moved among his men, observing their reactions to the relentless pressure. Arguments about tactics erupted, and doubt crept into their thoughts. It was evident that the unity they had fought to maintain was beginning to erode. In a brief lull between exchanges of gunfire, Kraus gathered his soldiers behind a makeshift barricade. "Listen," he began, his voice steady but compassionate. "I know this is hard. We're all scared. But remember, we are here for each other. We must communicate and rise above our fears." He noticed young Hans fidgeting with his rifle, his face pale. "Oberleutnant, what if we can't hold them back? What if we fail?" Kraus felt a pang of empathy. "Failure is a possibility, Hans, but we cannot let that dictate our actions. We must fight with everything we have. This battle is not just about holding the line, it's about standing together." Reinvigorated by Kraus's words, Hans nodded, determination returning to his eyes. Kraus felt pride swell within him. These moments of vulnerability were crucial in a time when fear threatened to overwhelm them. As they prepared for the next wave of fighting, Kraus sensed that the Americans were becoming bolder. He knew they needed to shift their tactics to regain the upper hand. "We need to be strategic and adaptable," he instructed. "Stay sharp and focus on your roles." The tension escalated when an American squad began to advance toward a vulnerable flank of their position. Without hesitation, Kraus quickly assembled a small group of soldiers. "We need to outflank them. Move quickly," he commanded. The urgency of the moment heightened as they crept closer to the enemy position, hearts pounding. Kraus led them with determination, aware that the success of this maneuver could change the tide of battle. As they reached the enemy's position, he signaled for silence and prepared his men for a surprise attack. With a deep breath, he launched the counterattack. Gunfire erupted, and the Americans scrambled, caught off guard. Kraus's men fought back fiercely, their adrenaline surging. The chaos of battle reignited their resolve, uniting them in purpose. Amidst the fighting, Kraus glimpsed Hans, now fully engaged, firing with renewed passion. This transformation filled him with hope. They were no longer just soldiers, but a family, solidifying their bond in the heat of battle. However, as they pushed forward, the toll of the fight became starkly clear. Bodies lay scattered in the sand. Cries for help pierced the air, a brutal reminder of the cost of war. Kraus felt a pang of anguish as he realized the bittersweet nature of their struggle. As darkness fell, enveloping the beach in shadows, Kraus knew the fight was far from over. His men were weary, yet their spirits had been reignited. The struggle had become personal, woven into their identities as soldiers. What had begun as a fight for survival had transformed into a testament of their strength and resilience. Kraus looked toward the horizon, where the darkening sky met the restless sea. He understood that the outcome of this battle would shape their destinies, but more importantly, it had forged an unbreakable bond among them. Together, they would face whatever lay ahead, united by shared purpose and unwavering courage, ready to confront the challenges of the night and the uncertainty of the dawn. As dawn broke over Omaha Beach, the first light of day illuminated the battlefield, revealing the harsh reality of their situation. Oberleutnant Wilhelm Kraus stood among his men, the weight of responsibility heavy on his shoulders. They had fought valiantly, but the cost was clear. The beach was strewn with the bodies of fallen soldiers, each a stark reminder of the sacrifices made. Kraus took a moment to reflect on the night's events. The chaos and violence had shattered any illusions of glory he had harbored about war. What he had witnessed transformed the camaraderie forged in battle into a deep bond of brotherhood. Yet, fear still loomed over them like a dark cloud. He felt the need to address his men, to reinforce the unity that had been their strength. "Listen, everyone," he began, his voice steady despite the exhaustion etched on their faces. "We faced darkness together, and we are still standing. We fought not just for ourselves, but for each other. Let us honor our fallen brothers by carrying their memories with us." The men looked at him, their expressions a mix of fatigue and resolve. Kraus could see Hans among them, visibly shaken but determined to stand firm. "We must remember that our struggle is not over. This battle is just one of many, and we need to prepare ourselves for what lies ahead." As the sun rose higher, illuminating the beach, Kraus encouraged his men to share their experiences from the battle. Stories of bravery and sorrow began to flow, each narrative a thread weaving them closer together. They expressed their fears, their losses, and their hopes, finding solace in the shared weight of their experiences. With the day's light came the need to regroup and fortify their position. Kraus organized teams to gather supplies and reinforce defenses. The task ahead was monumental, but there was a renewed sense of purpose among them. They were rebuilding not just their physical defenses, but their spirits as well. Kraus moved among his men, listening to their concerns and offering support. He understood that true leadership required vulnerability, and that sharing their fears was a path towards strength. The camaraderie that had been tested in battle was solidifying into something deeper, a family bound by shared struggles. As evening approached, Kraus gathered his men for a moment of remembrance. They formed a circle, heads bowed, honoring those who had fought alongside them. It was a solemn yet hopeful gathering, a reminder that they were still alive and united. Each man recognized that they were not just soldiers, they were part of a larger narrative of resilience. In that moment, Kraus felt a profound shift within himself. The burden of leadership transformed from a weight to a source of strength. He realized that authentic leadership was about embracing humanity, learning from their pain, and nurturing connections capable of withstanding even the fiercest storms. As night fell, Kraus looked out at the waves crashing against the shore, contemplating the journey ahead. The coming days would bring new challenges, but he sensed a renewed purpose within him. He was not just leading a unit, he was nurturing a family forged in adversity. Together, they would face whatever lay ahead, drawing strength from one another and honoring the legacy of those they had lost. The battle for Omaha Beach had marked the beginning of a new chapter, one defined by resilience, unity, and an unbreakable spirit.